Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki.
We're going to try something different today. We're going to read from Bhagavatam, chapter 9, canto 1, which is the passing away of Bhishma Dev in the presence of Lord Krishna. Because I was reading that and I think there's some pretty good points, some pretty relevant points. So let's see how we do. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyanandana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stabitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swantikam Vansha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaipacha Paditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay. The passing away of Bhishma Dev in the presence of Lord Krishna. I'm just going to read the...
Shloka number?
I'm just going to read from the beginning, and I'm going to skip Prabhupada's purports because quite elaborate descriptions of all the personalities there, and we might only get to verse 5 until the time is up if we do so, for the purpose of this talk. Text 1. Sutta Goswami said, being afraid for having killed so many subjects on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Maharaj Yudhishthira went to the scene of the massacre. There Bhishma Dev was lying on a bed of arrows, about to pass away. At that time all his brothers followed him on beautiful chariots drawn by first-class horses decorated with gold ornaments. With them were Vyasa and rishis like Daumya, the learned priest of the Pandavas, and others. O sage amongst the Brahmanas, Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, also followed, seated on a chariot with Arjuna. Thus King Yudhishthira appeared very aristocratic, like Kuvera surrounded by his companions, the Guyakas. Seeing him, Bhishma, lying on the ground like a demigod fallen from the sky, the Pandava king Yudhishthira, along with his younger brother and Lord Krishna, bowed down before him. Just to see the chief of the descendants of King Bharat, Bhishma, all the great souls in the universe, namely the rishis among the demigods, brahmanas and kings, all situated in the quality of goodness, were assembled there. All the sages like Parvata Muni, Narada, Daumya, Vyas, the incarnation of God, Brihadasva, Bharadvaj, and Parashuram, and disciples Vashishta, Indra Pramad, Trita, Gritsamad, Asita, Kakshivan, Gautama, Atri, Kaushika, and Sudarshana were present. And many others like Sukadev Goswami and others purified souls, Kashyapa and Angirasa, and others, all accompanied by their respective disciples, arrived there. Bhishma Dev, who was the best among the 8 Vasus, received and welcomed all the great and powerful rishis who were assembled there, for he knew perfectly all the religious principles according to time and place. And this is this is like we could do a week-long seminar on just this intro. It's interesting that the whole conundrum of the Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita is that they love each other and they're at war with each other at the same time. There's no such thing. Hare Krishna, yeah, come put here. That's Jai Maharaj. You see Maharaj now still, when senior devotees come, like he can't talk anymore, but he's still, receiving them. Like Jayadvaita Swami, myself, others are like, can we just shut this down by now? Like, it doesn't make any sense anymore. But Maharaj just says, no. I was speaking with Jayadvaita Swami this morning, and I said, yeah, it's as last instructions go, it's pretty high level. And he looked at me and said, oh, it's the highest level. It's right up there with the best of them, right? So we can take example from this. And it's also, I was kind of meditating on, it's also a way of processing grief, doing your duty. This is what happens, like in this particular story, is that they're all there, they're all grieving, they're not detached. It's not like, oh, that's the mental platform, or that's material. No, when great Vaishnavas leave, you grieve, right? You don't grieve for oh, now he can't give me maha sweets in the morning, or so. That's not what we're grieving for, but it's the loss of the relationship. That it's the change of service. Now I don't get to have that relationship with Maharaj anymore, and I'll have to transform it somehow. And this is how we transform it, is duty. Duty sounds very boring. It's like, because it basically means doing something you don't want to do, right? It means when you don't want to do something, you do it anyway. That's duty, right? But it also allows you to process, instead of just ending up curled up in fetal position on the couch, feeling sorry for yourself and just going into a perpetual state of depression. You get on with it, but you still feel the grief. But then as you get on with it, the relationship transforms, right? And it becomes like you can reminisce and you can remember, but you keep active, and then you can also build new relationships. That's what is explained in this chapter, is that all the eternal associates of the Lord, they get on with it, and because there are still Vaishnavas here, right? So that's our duty now, is to live in such a way with the other Vaishnavas that would be pleasing to Kadamba Kanana Swami, right? That's the service we can do for him. We were talking about how the closest I've ever felt, I've been very, very blessed to have a lot of association directly and personal with Maharaj. But the closest I've ever felt to him is always when I'm making sacrifices for the preaching mission, because I know he would be very pleased with that. And when it's really uncomfortable, because let's be honest, he's been in some uncomfortable situations. Like, he took a bullet for this temple, right? And he's been thrown downstairs, and I had to smuggle him out of Mayapur once because there was a riot going on, and like, he puts himself at risk for Krishna. And so when I feel like in my own tiny way I'm putting myself at risk, like I'm preaching in London, it's a rough place, it's not exactly the Dham, right? I feel very close to Maharaj, because it's like, yeah, he would be happy. Not that I'm suffering, but like that I'm doing my duty, that I'm putting my own comfort aside, right? And so that's the whole point of duty, right? And how it becomes a support of rasa. Does that make sense? Because otherwise it's just sahajism, or it's just sentimentalism, right? So they work together really well. Lord Sri Krishna is situated in everyone's heart, yet he manifests his transcendental form by his internal potency. This very Lord was sitting before Bhishma Dev, and since Bhishma Dev knew of his glories, he worshipped him duly. The sons of Maharaj Pandu were sitting silently nearby, overtaken with affection for their dying grandfather. Seeing this, Bhishma Dev congratulated them with feeling. There were tears of ecstasy in his eyes, for he was overwhelmed by love and affection. See, they're overwhelmed. It's not that they're just kind of like, it's you know, because it's the question that keeps coming up, like, am I allowed to feel sad, or should I just be like Atmarama, you know? No, you're expected to feel sad, right? We're Vaishnavas, we're not Mayavadis or Smartas or something, right? So we're very soft-hearted. This is what Prabhupada says about Arjuna in chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita, why the bow is slipping from his hand and his voice is faltering, because he's a Vaishnava. He's very soft-hearted. We are emotional, but we're not driven by emotion. Does that make sense? We don't make decisions out of emotion. We don't go to Govardhan and throw ourselves off, you know, but we may, for a nanosecond, consider it, right? And then we talk with our God family and they can calm us down. Yeah. Bhishma Dev said, "Oh, what terrible suffering and what terrible injustice you good souls suffer for being the sons of religion personified. You did not deserve to remain alive under these tribulations, yet you were protected by the Brahmanas, God and religion." So this is another point also. See, I can just keep commenting on everything. Because sometimes we hear this like, yeah, I mean, material life is just suffering, and spiritual life is just like bliss and chanting, dancing, feasting. And then you find yourself in a situation like this, and it's like, really? I don't think so, right? So it's not. And you also see it when you try and preach to non-devotees. If you lead with material life is just suffering, they're like, maybe for you, but I go out clubbing and I can do all sorts of things. That's not how we measure it. We don't measure it by our senses, right? So there's gonna be always a wide variety of emotional states. That's just the mind, right? The question is it temporary grief and long-term fulfillment, or is it temporary excitement and long-term grief? That's the question, right? It's like the yin-yang symbol, you know, there's a little bit of the black and the white and the... So I'm just now remembering a story of Prabhupada where they were driving somewhere in America, and there was road work, and it said temporary inconvenience, permanent benefit, and Prabhupada started laughing and said they got it wrong, it's the other way around. Temporary benefit, permanent inconvenience. And as someone who has been based in London for 5 years, I can tell you it's absolutely true. There is nowhere in central London where you cannot hear construction going on all the time, like these power drills, because they have to keep erecting these new buildings, because that's what makes these like capitalist materialists excited, is to like less than half of the population in London are British, right? So it's a good place to get a real close look at the Kali Yuga. And of course, for us, we are sitting here in this. It's got walls, it's got light, it's got everything we need. There's a floor and there's some mats, and it's ever fresh. Why? Because Krishna Katha. Because we're not expecting this building to make us happy. Imagine inviting people to your house and then, see? And that's what you've got. Beers in the fridge, right? It's so empty, right? How did I get onto that? I don't even remember. Any comments or questions at this point? I think this is a good time to hand it over to you, guys. Or, I mean, also just like any consideration. It doesn't have to be straight directly on this. I'm not as strict as Jay Advaita Swami. Don't tell him I said so. No?
But where exactly are emotions seated? Are they actually coming from the soul?
Well, that depends. So emotions they're experienced by the soul. Everything is experienced by the soul. So the emotions are transformations in the mind, right? There's a segment of our philosophy called rasa tattva. Yeah. Usually we say rasa or tattva, but there's a tattva of the rasa, of how we have the sthai-bhav, which is our permanent relationship with Krishna. It can be either Shanta or Dasa or Shakti. And then you have some anubhavas that can be like anu as following, certain experiences. They could be like hair standing on end, or perspiration, or faltering of the voice. And then you have some more subtle, what are they called? Naishtika bhavas, I think. I don't quote, it's been a while. But there are more like moods shifting as a result of that. And some of them are compatible, Hare Krishna. Some of them are not compatible. Now what happens when we get distracted by the modes, like we come under the spell of Maya, is that we start relating these transformations to the energy itself, rather than the energy just being our medium to contact Krishna. Right? That's what we do when we do arati. We offer all the elements back to Krishna and remind ourselves that it's actually Him. I am the offering, I am the sacrifice, and all of that, right? So where are they seated? Well, they're seated in the heart, in our soul, but whether they are real or false depends on whether our ego is real or false, right? So if our ego is real, that means we recognize that this is just a game we're playing with Krishna. So, like in our Shastra, there's not a lot of like brahmacharis in the 10th canto, right? They're just too boring. Like it's just not fun. So there's a lot of cowherd boys and cowherd girls, and when you bring in the brahmanas, it's just to give a bad example of what not to do when Krishna comes and asks for something, right? So why do we worship the brahmanas? It's because we're on the false ego side. So actually, self-satisfaction and inner peace and this like shanti ras is valuable when you're in material consciousness, because it teaches us how not to be too attached to what's false. But as you get closer and closer to that, it becomes about adding what's real. So you see in 10th canto is full of devotees going nuts, and they're scared and they're frustrated, they're angry with Krishna, and they're just because you give your life over to Krishna doesn't mean you have to agree with everything. That's illusion. That's the Mayavad thing, where it's just like everything is illusion. No, it's not. It's just the illusion is that it's about me. Like if I want to serve Guru Maharaj at the expense of my God family gaining access to him, or if I want to sit in the apartment next to Guru Maharaj and you can just sort off and figure out what you want to do yourself, that's false ego. That's not devotional service. So my duty now is, because I've been asked to sit here and try and, facilitate churning these emotions and processing this grief period with you guys, and fortunately that works really well for me. I just had a couple of days where I didn't have much service and not much was going on. There was a point I was going out of my mind, because my mind was just like going like a feedback loop, and there's like the idle mind is the devil's workshop, right? So I was freaking out. So this gives me also a chance. You see what I mean? Like that's so the emotions are just the transformations of the mind, but you still have a mind when you're self-realized, right? It's just all connected to Krishna. It's just full focus on Krishna, and that means even when you're frustrated, you're still in bliss. Like the gopis love being angry at Krishna. It's hilarious, right? You see whenever a young couple are flirting, they're all picking at each other and being a little offended, and it's like it's a game, but because the relationship is strong enough, the trust is there, that makes it fun. You can see it with friends also. They're teasing each other like bloke friends, they're pushing each other off a ledge, and sometimes it goes horribly wrong because there's a floor further down than they thought, right? But at the same time, like if I go up to the, like you have in Tesco's, the supermarket, right? There's a guy at the till. I go up and start cracking jokes with him. He's going to look at me like, who are you? I'm just working here, right? Because there's no relationship, so it's just weird, right? So that's why our relationship as Vaishnavas only actually begins, it's based on service, but it only actually begins at friendship. I've heard Guru Maharaj say many times, I will only initiate someone that I can be a friend with. Like if I don't feel like I can be your friend, I'm not going to initiate you, because there won't be a real relationship, right? So yeah. So the emotions are the experience of rasa in the heart, in the consciousness, but they can be based on either side. Yeah. Anything more? Or yeah.
How can we be of the best service to Maharaj at this time?
Well, I think you're doing it right now. You just be with your God family. Maharaj is in internal consciousness now. He's just focused fully on Krishna. He's just lying with his beads in his hand and just manasa japa, and he's getting all the help that there's not much anyone can do anymore. And so what we have to do now is keep going. That's also what this chapter, why I chose this chapter, is about. The entire Mahabharata, the longest poem in the history of the world, 100,000 verses, culminates here. It's done, it's over. And the good guys won, right? But they also have to, now we have to move on. That's why this is where Bhagavatam starts. Like the first canto of Bhagavatam is actually the Mahabharata, just seen from a devotional perspective, where the Mahabharata is written more from a dharmic and social perspective, right? How not to be an asshole, basically. It's tricky sometimes, because Duryodhana is a religious guy too, right? And you can see Bhishma ends up fighting for the quote-unquote bad guys, right? So it's not so simple. But the point that Narada Muni makes is that without devotion to the Lord, it's all pointless. It doesn't matter if you're a good guy. You're still a bad guy, right? And the only way to keep it ever fresh is to engage with the Lord. So that's your service to Guru Maharaj now. And for all of us, feel for you. So that's what I'm doing. It's not. Why? Because of the protection. There's no. All neophytes, let's be real, right? But there's no risk of failure as long as we're trying sincerely. That's the only currency we have is our faith and enthusiasm. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, what is the driving force in devotional service and in advancement? It's not intelligence, it's not knowledge, it's faith and enthusiasm. And then you will be successful. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has another good one, where he says, basically, if you understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we can count you among the pure devotees. Because the rest is just like details. We'll get rid of the conditioning and all the resentments and all the anarthas and upadhis and all of these things. That's like a lifetime of Lord Brahma is the blink of an eye in the spiritual world. So it may seem like a long time. I was just going to say a word that I'm glad I didn't say. I'm in London for most of the time. I get contaminated. My apologies. So, So it feels like a long time for us, like I've been fighting this anartha for 10 years, right? But it's not. You've been fighting this anartha for 100,000 lifetimes. You just can't remember, and you're so caught up in your senses that you just want everything to stop right now with no sacrifice on your part. That's really how we are, right? Like, and we can't see that we have to go through a little bit of austerity to get the benefit. It's like being at the dentist. That's like my only phobia. It's like just sitting there with my mouth open while he drills away. I had one at a point where he tried to calm me down by playing classical music. That was just like a horror movie. That just had the opposite effect, like da 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 da. So I asked him to turn it off, and somehow I tried to relate this is how desperate I was, the sound of the drill with the buzzing bees in Vrindavan. I tried to imagine that there was the sound of the bees in Vrindavan. That seemed to soothe me a little bit, right? But it's only half an hour, but it feels like an eternity because I just want to get out. Whereas when I'm at the MVT having pizza, half an hour is like a lot quicker, right? And when you're in the spiritual world, it's like not even, like how many half hours are there in a lifetime of Brahma? Lord Brahma's life is 311 trillion years long. And that's the blink of an eye in the spiritual world, right? So, yeah. So that's what we do. We just, I'm not going to say we just get on with it, because that sounds like you just, whatever. No, but we do just get on with, like, with all the grief we have and all the doubt and all the frustration and like, maybe it was something I wanted to say to Maharaj and now I'm never going to say it. Trust me, he already knows. He knows us better than we know ourselves. Like, I got to say all the things because I've been here quite a bit. And all of the things I was saying that I thought this is going to be really deep and he was like, yeah. Did you not hear me, Maharaj? I said, yeah. Do you remember that time in Vrindavan when... Yeah, so don't worry about it. It's not as important as we think. So, yeah. Anything else? No? Okay, so I'll take my phone back out. The sons of Maharaj Pandu were sitting silently nearby, overtaken with affection for their dying grandfather. Seeing this, Bhishmadev congratulated them with feeling. There were tears of ecstasy in his eyes, for he was overwhelmed by love and affection. Bhishmadev said, "Oh, what terrible sufferings and what terrible injustices you good souls suffer for being the sons of religion personified. You did not deserve to remain alive under those tribulations, yet you were protected by the Brahmanas, God and religion. As far as my daughter-in-law Kunti is concerned, upon the great general Pandu's death, she became a widow with many children, and therefore she suffered greatly. And when you were grown up, she suffered a great deal also because of your actions. In my opinion, this is all due to inevitable time, under whose control everyone in every planet is carried, just as the clouds are carried by the wind." So basically what he's saying here is like, this is confusing. Imagine like you're pierced by 1,000 arrows, you're lying down on the ground, except you're not even touching the ground. It's like you're just hanging there, suspended by arrows. And you're trying to be all religious and everyone's like, "Hey, no, I'm all right, really, yeah." It's mysterious, like we don't always know the plan of the Lord, right? Like it's confusing at times. Bhishmadev is confused, he's one of the Mahajans. So we're allowed to be confused, right? These are great souls. They're experiencing exactly the same things we are, just more intensely, because that's what makes them great, right? And so we can see that also, like, in relation to ourselves. I went through, like, it's been a rough time the last few years. But I set out to be, like, with my huge ego, I'm going to do some great preaching. Well, what is going to make it great? That it's hard. So why am I feeling self-pity when it's hard? That was what I set out to do, right? So like when you see Bhishma Dev here, it's pretty hard. You know, he's in a tough spot. But he still keeps his focus on the devotees and the Lord. And that's what makes it blissful. It's not the material comfort that comes with being a devotee. It's not like we're all riding around in Rolls Royces with special rims and pimped up and stuff. Like, no, it's the connection with the Lord, right? And so we're allowed to feel confused. You know what I mean? It's like, where do we go from here? That's not going to be clear, but it will be glorious when we look back, and we're going to figure it out together, right? And that's the glorious part, right? That's why Maharaj, he keeps accepting these senior devotees coming into his flat, even though he can't speak, because that's what he did with them. That's what made his life glorious. And though we take that example and keep it going, and it's been going that way since Lord Brahma. Right? That's our line. Lord Brahma, Narad Muni, all the way down to Madhvacharya, Lord Chaitanya, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, right? Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Prabhupada, Jayadvaita Swami, Kadamba Swami, and you. So big shoes to fill, Prabhu. But also a lot. Yeah, no. It's just funnier to say it that way. But also a lot of empowerment. It's like you're surfing a wave, right? Like the power is already. What power do we have? Right? We're 1/10,000th the tip of a hair. If I look at where I was born, like my family and like upbringing, is like, how the hell did I end up sitting in this chair right now? That's really, really unlikely. And yet here I am. It's like watching an elephant fly. It's like it's not supposed to do that, but there it goes. So we are empowered, every single one of us, right? With all of the preaching potency that Kadamba Swami has is ours, right? So, and we'll still do it in our own way, right? That's the beauty. This is a personal philosophy. So we're not meant to become copies of him, but like if we can learn anything from him, it's that whatever you set your mind to, you can do it, right? Like you should see, Jayadvaita Swami has always been for me like the Prayojana sannyas, like the sannyas of sannyas. Like there's just nothing that rattles his mind, but to see how impressed he is watching Kadamba Swami now, it's like it's very, very touching. Like he's like, this guy's next level. Like, and he is. It's like, yeah. So it's very, very sweet because we know also that Kadamba Swami thinks that Jayadvaita Swami is next level. Like my last conversation with Maharaj, he said, yeah, Jayadvaita Swami, he just took me to a completely different level. Yeah. And now it feels like Kadamba Swami is like taking Jayadvaita Swami, like I was like, it's very, very powerful, right? And we're part of that line. That line is flowing through us now, right? Questions come? Yeah.
Going back to your previous comment, you said something like, I'm just gonna rephrase. You said something. You don't have to lament for things we couldn't say to Maharaj because he knows everything already. But what about things we couldn't ask? How do we resolve that?
Okay. Yeah. So your question is, how about things we couldn't ask, like things we would like to ask Maharaj, but yeah, it just the opportunity didn't arise. Meditate on the question, because one day, and read Prabhupada's good books is a good thing. Like plenty of times, I've had like questions where I'm like, oh yeah, I really want to ask Maharaj that. Who the hell is calling? Someone from England? Not now. And I literally open Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam and it's like right there, right? So that's one way. Another way is to associate with your God family, because there's a lot of devotees who've been around Maharaj for a lot. And even though our questions and our situations are unique, they're also like, I don't want to say basic, I also don't want to say generic, but it's usually there's a big overlap in the issues we have and some of the problems we go through, and right. So there's a good chance that your God family, wow, that's a stubborn bastard, that your God family can help you with whatever it is you wanted to ask Maharaj. Does that make sense? Oh, and also, by the way, I feel like I should revisit one of our topics from previous, the dreams. I was meditating on it because what I said was like, if you have a dream where Maharaj appears, it may not be that Maharaj is literally descending from the spiritual world and entering into your mind and manifesting there because he just really felt like it. Could be that you're just having a dream, right? But then let's look at what that dream represents and what does that dream indicate that Maharaj would have you do. I used the example of, I had a dream with Maharaj where we were on the savannah hunting, and I took it as he was looking at me like, this is fun. So what did I do? My message from that dream was shoot for the rhino, like go big. What I didn't do was move to Africa and buy a gun. So what I'm saying is, don't make rash life decisions that may be irreversible based on a dream you're having with Maharaj. I just want to make that clear, because otherwise I'm going to have someone on the phone one day. You said I'm here in Antarctica, and it's like, whoa, that's a long way away. So, yeah. So, metaphysics, right? Oh, how wonderful is the influence of inevitable time. It's irreversible. Otherwise, how can there be reverses in the presence of King Yudhisthira, the son of the demigod controlling religion, Bhima, the great fighter with a club, the great bowman Arjuna and his mighty weapon Gandiva, and above all the Lord, the direct well-wisher of the Pandavas? O King, no one can know the plan of the Lord Sri Krishna. Even though great philosophers inquire exhaustively, they are bewildered. O best among the descendants of Bharata, Yudhisthira, I maintain, therefore, that all this is within the plan of the Lord. Accepting the inconceivable plan of the Lord, you must follow it. You are now the appointed administrative head, and, my Lord, you should now take care of those subjects who are now rendered helpless. This is again like Maharaj, he's giving his last instructions while dying as Yudhisthira. He's like, oh, by the way, if you want to not end up like me, like this is how you do it, right? Like he's still instructing while he's lying there. This I think is funny. This Sri Krishna is no other than the inconceivable original personality of Godhead. He is the first Narayana, the supreme enjoyer, but he is moving amongst the descendants of King Vrishni, just like one of us, and he is bewildering us with his self-created energy. O King, Lord Shiva, Narada, the sages among the demigods, and Kapila, the incarnation of Godhead, all know very confidentially about his glories through direct contact. O King, that personality whom, out of ignorance only, you thought to be your maternal cousin, your very dear friend, well-wisher, counselor, messenger, benefactor, etc., is that very personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Being the absolute personality of Godhead, he's present in everyone's heart. He is equally kind to everyone, and he's free from the false ego of differentiation. Therefore, whatever he does is free from material inebriety. He is equibalanced. Yeah, so that was another thing I was thinking about, how we all have the super soul in our heart, and the super soul is obviously also in Maharaj's heart. And there's something about death. It's the great equalizer, right? Like all of our positions and all of our track record and all of our character defects, and they are actually superfluous in our ultimate relationship with Kadamba Kanana Swami and with Krishna, and therefore also with each other, like, right? Like the relationship that we have go beyond that, right? Otherwise, it would just be karmakanda. It would be pious, it might be religious, but it wouldn't be transcendental. That's what makes our process superior, is that although we have, some are born in Prabhu's bodies and they can be in the apartment, some can't because they're born in a female body, and we have those who are in a sannyas dress and those who are in saffron, those who are more or less colorful and all that. It's there, and it helps us to gain a framework of how we relate to each other, but ultimately it is superfluous because we're all Vaishnavas, and that trumps everything, right? So if you want equality, this is the only way you're going to get it, right? Only by becoming a Vaishnava, because materially, factually speaking, there is no equality. Some are tall, some are short, some are smart, some are dumber than a bag of hammers. It's just a fact. And just making a guy who's dumber than a bag of hammers into an airline pilot, just because he has equal rights, doesn't solve problems. It creates problems. Factually speaking, we're not equal on the material plane, right? But that's just because karma keeps, this inevitable time Bhishma Dev talks about here is like, it just keeps transforming, and sometimes, this is Maharaja's story, sometimes you're on top of the elephant, sometimes the elephant is on top of you, right? And it changes. And so we're all in different positions, like last life, there's a good chance I was a woman, right? And then next life, hopefully I'll be in the spiritual world, otherwise maybe, who knows? Because that's one of the points made in Shastra, is that it tends to bounce back and forth, right? But at the end of the day, we are souls serving Krishna. We're trying to be, everyone is, right? Whether you're doing it through the material energy with false ego, or you're doing it as a Mahajan or eternal associate, or probably anything in between. It's just different levels of service. But at the end of the day, Krishna loves everyone equally, right? And so the only way to really uncover that and get closer to that is to become, or to aspire to become a devotee. A devotee is actually a very, that's a high standard, but we're aspiring to become a devotee, right? And that's what brings us to this platform of equality, where it's like, I never actually felt home anywhere. Some of you, if you know me, know that I did my fair share of experimenting with subcultures before I became a devotee, because I just felt I didn't fit in anywhere. So I was a hacker and a skateboarder and a political activist and a techno DJ and a video game developer, and like 1 year I had 50 jobs in 50 weeks. And I became a devotee. And I feel like I came home, right? And I feel like some of you guys, I don't know, but I still feel like your family. I still feel like I'm home with you, because we have an actual identity together. Even through all of our uniqueness and our different capabilities and inclinations and tastes and things we don't like so much, we still have a shared value system that is actually sustainable, because it begins and ends with Krishna. That's pretty special. Anything on this? I mean, feel free to just interrupt me whenever. Yeah.
So you spoke a lot about the God family and the relationships within the God family.
Mm.
And with some people you have a stronger, with Guru Maharaj, everyone had a very personal, very distinct relationship with him. And because of that, some devotees, had strong relationships with the God family and others did not. How important is it to have relationships amongst the God family? And if those relationships don't exist, how do we reach out? Just to give a little bit more context to that question. For example, in South Africa, because of the history that's there's a lot of racial divide. So even you find amongst the God family, there's a racial divide.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, yeah, so, yeah. So how important on a scale from 1 to 10 is it to have good relations with the God family? Can we say that's pretty much the question, right? Well, the principle is that with someone, and then you develop that relationship. Doesn't have to be your God family. There are others, like I'm originally from Scandinavia. They have some pretty small yatras there, and there are devotees that they just don't have any God family around, right? But there are other devotees. So if there, for whatever reason, is racial divide, that could be a practical or societal racial divide. It could also be a cultural racial divide. It could be like a mental racial divide. You don't have to, like, it's like pick your battles kind of a thing. You know what I mean? If you have devotees around you that you really get along well with, and they happen to be from an equal or same cultural background, or they happen to be from a completely different cultural background, you just go with them, right? It doesn't have to become your mission to fix the racial problem in the entire country of South Africa in order for you to progress in your Krishna consciousness, right? So it doesn't even have to be this God family, but we have something pretty significant in common, is that we've all taken a look at Kadamba Kanana Swami and said, yeah, that looks like the way I want to go with my spiritual life. And so there's a good chance that you're going to have something in common with the devotees in this room. Does that make sense? Like, if there's one thing I really love, is to hear stories about Guru Maharaj. And so anyone who has a story about Guru Maharaj is my friend, immediately.